I was on my way to the cemetery to visit my late husband when I stopped to buy flowers. As I was leaving the shop, a stranger leaned close and whispered, "Isn't he the one buried there?" Before I could ask what he meant, he vanished into the crowd. When I finally reached the cemetery, my husband's grave was open and completely empty. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. The morning started ordinary enough. I woke at 6:30, made my coffee the way I'd done for 40 years, and watched the sunrise paint the Michigan countryside in shades of amber and gold. At 64, I'd learned to appreciate these quiet moments. They were mine alone now, had been for the past 3 years since Richard passed. Every Wednesday, I visited his grave. Rain or shine, winter or summer, I made the 20-minute drive to Oakwood Cemetery with fresh flowers. Today, I'd chosen chrysanthemums, his favorites in autumn. The florist on Maple Street knew me by name, always had my usual bouquet ready by 9 o'clock. "Morning, Mrs. Bates," Jenny called from behind the counter as the bell chimed my arrival. "Your chrysanthemums are just about ready. Give me 2 minutes to wrap them." I browsed the small shop while she worked, running my fingers along the cool petals of various arrangements. The scent of roses mixed with eucalyptus reminded me of our wedding day, of Richard's nervous smile as I walked down the aisle. 41 years of marriage, 3 children, a lifetime of memories now reduced to weekly visits and photographs on the mantel. "Here you are." Jenny handed me the bouquet, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. "They're particularly beautiful this week." I paid and turned toward the door, already thinking about the route I'd take. Left on Maple, right on Oak, straight through to the cemetery gates. I'd walked this path in my mind so many times it had worn a groove in my thoughts. That's when he appeared. An older man, perhaps 70, with weathered skin and pale blue eyes that seemed to look straight through me. He stood just outside the shop door, blocking my exit. I'd never seen him before in our small town of Millbrook, and I knew everyone. "Excuse me," I said politely, trying to step around him. He didn't move. Instead, he leaned in close enough that I could smell tobacco on his breath, and whispered, "Isn't he the one buried there?" The words sent ice down my spine. His voice carried something I couldn't name. Warning, perhaps, or mockery. Before I could respond, before I could ask what he meant or who he was, he turned and walked away with surprising speed for someone his age. Within seconds, he'd disappeared around the corner. I stood frozen, the chrysanthemums trembling in my hands. "Mrs. Bates?" Jenny's voice came from behind me. "Are you all right?" "That man," I managed. "Did you see him? The older gentleman just outside?" Jenny stepped to the window and looked out. "I don't see anyone. What did he want?" "I'm not sure." My heart was racing now, a sensation I hadn't experienced in years. "It's nothing. Thank you, Jenny." I hurried to my car, an old Buick that Richard had maintained meticulously until his final days. My hands shook as I inserted the key into the ignition. The stranger's words echoed in my mind. "Isn't he the one buried there?" What did that mean? Of course, Richard was buried there. I'd stood beside his grave as they lowered the casket. I'd chosen his headstone, selected the plot beside the old oak tree where we'd once had a picnic on our 10th anniversary. I visited every Wednesday without fail. Unless... I pushed the thought away. It was absurd. The man was clearly confused, perhaps suffering from dementia. He'd mistaken me for someone else. But as I drove toward Oakwood Cemetery, I couldn't shake the feeling of wrongness that had settled over me like a heavy blanket. The familiar route seemed different now, the trees casting longer shadows, the sky somehow darker despite the morning sun. I pulled through the iron gates at 9:45. The cemetery was empty, as it usually was on Wednesday mornings. I preferred it that way. The solitude gave me space to talk to Richard, to tell him about our grandchildren, about the leaking roof I needed to fix, about how much I missed his laugh. I parked in my usual spot and gathered the chrysanthemums. The walk to his grave took me past the Collins family plot, the memorial for Korean War veterans, and the small stone angel that marked where a child had been buried in 1952. I knew every marker by heart. Richard's grave was near the back, under the oak tree. I could see it from 50 feet away, or rather, I could see where it should have been. My steps slowed. Something was wrong. The ground looked disturbed, darker than the surrounding grass. As I got closer, my chest tightened with each breath. The grave was open, not just disturbed, completely excavated. A gaping hole where Richard should have been resting. Dirt piled on either side, still fresh and dark with moisture. The headstone remained in place, his name carved in granite. Richard James Bates, 1938-2022, beloved husband and father. But beneath it, nothing. The chrysanthemums fell from my hands. I don't know how long I stood there, staring into that empty earth. Time seemed to fold in on itself. My mind raced through possibilities, each more impossible than the last. Grave robbers? In Millbrook? We'd never had so much as a theft in 40 years. A prank? But who would do something so cruel, so elaborate? And then the stranger's words came back. Isn't he the one buried there? He'd known. Somehow he'd known before I did. I should have called someone, the police, the cemetery management, my children. Instead, I found myself kneeling at the edge of the hole, peering into the darkness as if Richard might somehow still be there, just deeper than expected. The walls were clean-cut, professional. This wasn't random vandalism. Someone had taken time, used proper equipment, done this with purpose. Mrs. Bates? I jerked back, nearly losing my balance. A young man in a cemetery maintenance uniform stood behind me, his face pale with shock. "What happened here?" he stammered. I was making my rounds and I don't know." My voice sounded strange, distant. "I came to visit and found it like this." He pulled out a phone with shaking hands. "I need to call Mr. Peterson, and probably the police. I've never seen anything like this." While he made his calls, I stood and brushed the dirt from my knees. My mind was beginning to work again, moving past the initial shock into something sharper. Questions formed like pieces of a puzzle I couldn't yet see. Who would dig up Richard's grave? Why would they do it so carefully, so thoroughly? And how did that stranger know? The maintenance worker finished his call and looked at me with concern. "Mrs. Bates, maybe you should sit down. You look really pale." "I'm fine." But I wasn't. Nothing was fine. "Did you notice anything unusual last night? Any vehicles, any activity?" He shook his head. "I left at 5:30 yesterday, same as always. Everything was normal then. We locked the gates at 6. So this happened after closing?" "Must have. But the gates were locked when I opened them this morning at 7. I don't understand how—" The sound of approaching sirens cut him off. Within minutes, the cemetery was filled with people. Police officers, the cemetery director Mr. Peterson, and eventually, a detective who introduced herself as Angela Morrison. She was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and professional, with questions I couldn't answer. "Do you have any idea who might have done this?" she asked, notebook in hand. I almost mentioned the stranger, but stopped. What would I say? An old man whispered something cryptic and walked away? They'd think I was a confused elderly woman, senile and unreliable. "No," I said instead. "I can't imagine why anyone would do this." Detective Morrison studied the open grave, then looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Was it suspicion? Pity? "We'll need to investigate thoroughly. This is a serious crime. Desecrating a grave carries significant penalties." "But where is he?" The question burst out of me. "Where is my husband?" She didn't have an answer. None of them did. By noon, the cemetery had been cordoned off with yellow tape. I gave my statement to 3 different officers, repeating the same information until the words lost all meaning. Finally, they allowed me to leave, though Detective Morrison made it clear she'd have more questions soon. I drove home in a daze, the route automatic, my mind replaying every detail of the morning, the stranger's words, the empty grave, the careful excavation. It all pointed to something planned, something intentional. But what? And why? My house sat at the end of a gravel driveway, a 2-story farmhouse Richard and I had bought when we were newlyweds. We'd raised our 3 children here, Michael, Susan, and Antonio. The place was too big for me now, but I couldn't imagine leaving it. Too many memories lived in these walls. I pulled into the garage and sat in the car for a long moment, trying to gather myself before going inside. I needed to call the children, tell them what happened. But what would I say? Your father's body has been stolen? It sounded insane, even in my own mind. The house felt different as I entered through the kitchen. The familiar creak of the screen door, the afternoon light through the lace curtains. Everything the same, yet everything changed. I set my purse on the counter and noticed my hands were still trembling. The phone rang, making me jump. I stared at it for 3 rings before answering. Mom? Susan's voice, sharp with worry. I just got a call from Detective Morrison. She said something about Dad's grave? What's going on? News traveled fast in small towns. I took a breath and told her everything, starting with the flowers and ending with the yellow tape. Susan listened in silence until I finished. This is insane, she said finally. Who would dig up a grave? Are they sure it was really empty? I saw it myself, Susan. There was nothing there. Maybe. Maybe there's been a mistake. Maybe they excavated the wrong plot. I wanted to believe that, but I'd stood at that grave 100 times. I knew exactly where Richard was buried, or where he should have been buried. I'm coming over, Susan said. Don't do anything until I get there. She hung up before I could protest. Susan had always been the take charge one, the problem solver. At 43, she worked as an attorney in Detroit, an hour's drive from Millbrook. She'd arrive by evening, full of questions and plans. I sat at the kitchen table and tried to think clearly. The stranger had known about the grave before I discovered it. That meant he was either involved or had information about who was. I needed to find him, but I didn't even know his name. And then I remembered. Jenny had security cameras in the flower shop. Every business in Millbrook did after the hardware store was robbed 5 years ago. The cameras would have captured the stranger's face. I grabbed my purse and headed back to the car. But as I reached for the door, something made me pause. On the kitchen table, partially hidden beneath the morning newspaper, was an envelope. Plain white, no return address, no stamp. Someone had put it there while I was at the cemetery. Someone had been in my house. My hands shook as I picked it up and opened it. Inside was a single photograph, old and faded, the edges worn with age. It showed Richard, but younger, perhaps in his 30s. He stood in front of a building I didn't recognize, wearing clothes I'd never seen, with his arm around a woman I'd never met. On the back, written in neat script, "The truth isn't where you buried it." I stood in my kitchen, staring at the photograph, my mind racing through 41 years of marriage. Every memory I thought I knew suddenly felt unreliable, like looking at a familiar painting and discovering it had always been hanging upside down. The woman in the photo was beautiful, dark hair, confident smile, her hand resting comfortably on Richard's chest in a way that spoke of intimacy, and Richard looked happy. Not the content happiness I'd known in our marriage, but something brighter, almost electric. I turned the photo over again. The truth isn't where you buried it. Someone had broken into my home to leave this. Someone wanted me to know that Richard had secrets. But who? And why now? 3 years after his death, I checked every window, every door. No signs of forced entry. The locks were intact, the windows secure. Whoever had come in either had a key or knew how to pick locks with professional precision. That thought made my skin crawl. A stranger moving through my home while I'd been at the cemetery, touching my things, leaving this message. I needed to think clearly. I needed answers. But first, I needed to know who that man at the flower shop was. I grabbed my purse and headed back into town. The afternoon sun was starting its descent, casting long shadows across Main Street. Millbrook looked peaceful, deceptively normal. The hardware store, the diner, the post office, everything exactly as it had been that morning, as if my world hadn't just been turned inside out. Jenny was restocking roses when I entered the flower shop. "Mrs. Bates," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "I didn't expect to see you again today. Is everything all right? Jenny, I need to ask you about your security cameras, the ones outside the shop." Her expression shifted to concern. "What's wrong? That man this morning, the one who spoke to me, I need to see footage of him. It's important." She hesitated. "I heard about what happened at the cemetery. The whole town's talking about it, but I'm not sure I should share security footage without." "Please." I kept my voice steady, but firm. That man knew something about my husband's grave before I discovered it was empty. He might be involved. Jenny's eyes widened. You should tell the police. I will. But first, I need to know who he is. She studied me for a long moment, then nodded. Come to the back office. The security system was simple but effective. Jenny pulled up the footage from that morning, fast-forwarding to 9:15. I watched myself enter the shop, saw Jenny prepare the flowers. Then, at 9:23, the stranger appeared. There, I said. Can you pause it? Jenny froze the frame. The image was clear enough. The man's face in profile as he waited outside the door. But something about him nagged at me. Something familiar I couldn't quite place. Can you print this? I asked. I suppose so. Jenny sent the image to her printer. Mrs. Bates, are you sure you don't want to call Detective Morrison? This seems serious. I will. Thank you, Jenny. I took the printed image and left before she could ask more questions. The truth was, I didn't trust Detective Morrison yet. She'd looked at me that morning with suspicion in her eyes, as if I might somehow be involved in the desecration of my own husband's grave. Until I understood what was happening, I needed to investigate quietly. Back in the car, I studied the printed photo more carefully. The man's features were distinct. A narrow nose, pronounced cheekbones, those pale blue eyes. I was certain I'd never met him, yet something about him felt familiar. My phone buzzed. A text from Michael, my oldest. Mom, Susan called me. What the hell is going on? I'm driving up from Indianapolis. Be there by 8. I texted back. I'm fine. We'll talk when you arrive. Within an hour, Antonio called too. My youngest, always the emotional one, his voice tight with worry. Mom, are you alone? Should I come stay with you? I'm all right, sweetheart. Susan and Michael are coming. I'll be fine. This is crazy. Who would dig up Dad's grave? Do the police have any leads? Not yet. I didn't mention the photograph or the stranger. Antonio would panic, insist I stay with him and his wife Claire in Ann Arbor. I needed space to think, to investigate without my children hovering. After I hung up, I sat in my car outside the flower shop and looked at both photographs, the security image and the old picture of Richard with the mysterious woman. I placed them side by side on the passenger seat. That's when I saw it. The building behind Richard in the old photograph had a sign, partially visible. Ridge Medical. Only a fragment, but it was something. A medical building. Richard had worked as an accountant for a manufacturing company his entire career. Why would he be photographed at a medical building with a woman I'd never met? I drove to the Millbrook Public Library, a small brick building on the corner of First and Pine. Connie Grant, the head librarian, had been cataloging town history for 30 years. If anyone could help me identify that building, it was her. Glenda, she greeted me warmly. I heard about the trouble at Oakwood. I'm so sorry. How are you holding up? As well as can be expected. I showed her the photograph of Richard. Connie, I'm trying to identify this building. Do you recognize it? She took the photo and examined it through her reading glasses. Ridge Medical could be Pinewood Ridge Medical Center. It was in Grayson County, about 40 miles east of here. Opened in 1982, closed in 1998. They tore it down a few years later to build condominiums. Grayson County. Richard used to travel there occasionally for work, or so he'd told me. Do you have any archives about that facility? I asked. Connie's expression grew curious. I might have some newspaper clippings. Give me a moment. She disappeared into the back room while I waited, my mind churning. If Richard had connections to a medical center I didn't know about, what else had he hidden? And why? Connie returned with a folder. Here's what I have. Not much, I'm afraid. A few articles about the center's opening, one about a fundraiser, and another about its closure due to financial difficulties. I flipped through the clippings. Most were mundane. Ribbon cuttings, charity events. Then I found something that made my breath catch. A photograph from 1985, labeled Pinewood Ridge Medical Center Annual Gala. In the background, barely visible but unmistakable, was Richard, and beside him, the same dark-haired woman from the photograph left in my kitchen. Connie, can I make copies of these? Of course. While she worked the copy machine, I photographed the newspaper clipping with my phone, zooming in on Richard and the woman. I needed to know who she was, what she'd meant to him. By the time I returned home, it was nearly 5 o'clock. Susan's car was already in the driveway. She must have driven faster than I'd expected. I found her in the living room, pacing, her attorney instincts on full display. "Mom, where were you?" She looked both worried and irritated. "I've been here 20 minutes. Your door was unlocked. I had some errands." I set my purse down, carefully keeping the photographs hidden. "Errands? Mom, your husband's grave was desecrated. You should be home, resting, letting the police handle this." "I'm fine, Susan. I don't need to rest." She studied me with narrowed eyes. "What aren't you telling me?" This was Susan's gift, or curse, depending on perspective. She could read people like trial evidence, spotting inconsistencies and evasions. It made her an excellent attorney and an exhausting daughter. "I'm just trying to understand what happened," I said carefully. "That's the police's job. The police think someone vandalized the cemetery, but it's more than that." "What do you mean?" I hesitated. Once I showed her the photographs, once I voiced my suspicions, there would be no going back. The image of Richard I'd protected, the memory of our marriage, it would all become subject to investigation, to doubt. But I needed answers more than I needed comfortable lies. I retrieved the photographs and handed them to Susan. "Someone left this in the house while I was at the cemetery this morning." She studied the old photo, her expression shifting from confusion to shock. "Who is she?" "I don't know, but look at the back." Susan flipped it over and read the message aloud. "The truth isn't where you buried it." She looked up at me. "Mom, this is threatening. Someone broke into your house. We need to call Detective Morrison right now." "Not yet." "What do you mean, not yet? This is evidence in a criminal investigation." "Susan, please. I need to understand what's happening first. Your father had secrets. Secrets someone wants me to discover. Until I know what they are, I can't trust anyone." "You think Dad was involved in something illegal?" "I don't know what to think. But this woman, this medical center, none of it fits with the life I thought we had." Susan sat down heavily on the couch. "This is insane. Dad was an accountant. He did tax returns and quarterly reports. He didn't have secret lives." "Then explain the photograph." She couldn't. We sat in silence, both of us staring at the image of Richard with a woman whose existence challenged everything we thought we knew. The front door opened. Michael walked in, still in his business suit, his face drawn with exhaustion from the drive. At 45, he looked more like Richard every year. The same strong jaw, the same way of carrying tension in his shoulders. "Mom?" He crossed the room and hugged me. "Are you okay?" "I've had better days." He spotted the photograph in Susan's hands. "What's that?" Susan handed it to him without a word. I watched Michael's face as he processed what he was seeing. Confusion, then recognition of his father, then the same shock Susan had shown. "Who is this woman?" he asked. "We don't know," Susan said. "Someone broke into the house and left it for Mom." Michael's expression darkened. "Someone broke in? Mom, you can't stay here alone. Pack a bag. You're coming to Indianapolis with me." "I'm not going anywhere. This isn't negotiable. Your husband's grave has been desecrated. Someone's breaking into your house, leaving cryptic messages. This is dangerous. Michael, I appreciate your concern, but this is my home. I'm not leaving. Then I'm staying here with you." "No, you're not. You have work, you have Sarah and the kids. I'm perfectly capable of taking care of myself." We'd had variations of this argument since Richard died. My children, well-meaning but suffocating, trying to protect me from everything. They saw my age and assumed fragility. They forgot I'd run this household for 40 years, managed finances, made decisions. They forgot I was more than just their mother. "At least let me install a security system," Michael said. "Cameras, new locks, an alarm. Fine, but I'm staying." Susan stood up, still holding the photograph. "We need to figure out who this woman is, and we need to find out what Dad was hiding." "I've already started," I said, and told them about the medical center, the newspaper clipping, the stranger at the flower shop. Michael listened with growing concern. "Mom, You're investigating a crime. That's not safe. Let the police handle it. The police don't know about any of this yet. And until I understand what it means, I'm not sure I should tell them. Why not? Susan demanded. Because someone went to a lot of trouble to show me these things. They dug up your father's grave. They broke into our home. They want me to find something specific. If I go to the police now, before I know what that something is, I might put us all in danger. It was a thin argument, I knew, but it was also true. Whoever was behind this had resources, planning, and information. They'd known where I'd be, when I'd be there. They'd orchestrated everything perfectly. Until I understood their endgame, rushing to the authorities felt like playing into their hands. Susan and Michael exchanged glances, that wordless sibling communication they'd perfected in childhood. 48 hours, Susan said finally. We'll help you investigate quietly for 2 days. But if we don't have answers by then, or if anything else happens, we go to Detective Morrison with everything. Agreed? I nodded, though I wasn't sure I meant it. Michael pulled out his phone. I'm calling a security company. They can have someone out here tonight for emergency installation. While he made arrangements, Susan spread the photographs on the coffee table. Okay. So we know Dad had some connection to this Pinewood Ridge Medical Center and this mystery woman. What else do we know? The stranger at the flower shop, I said. He knew about the grave. He might know about all of this. Then we need to find him. Susan picked up the security still from Jenny's shop. I'll take this to a private investigator I know in Detroit. He has facial recognition software, access to databases. If this man has any kind of record, we'll find him. What about Mom? Michael asked, hanging up. Security company will be here at 7, but she shouldn't be alone until then. I'm standing right here, I said. And I'm fine. But I wasn't fine. As evening settled over the farmhouse, as my children argued about protection and plans, I kept thinking about that empty grave, about Richard's body, missing, about a truth I'd buried, or thought I had, that someone was determined to unearth. The question wasn't just who that woman was, or what Richard had hidden. The question was, how many more secrets would surface before this was over? The security technician arrived at 7:15, a young man named Travis who worked efficiently, despite Michael hovering over his shoulder, questioning every camera angle and sensor placement. Susan had left for Detroit with the stranger's photograph, promising to return by morning with information. Antonio called twice more, each time sounding more anxious, until I finally had to assure him I wasn't in immediate danger. By 9 o'clock, the house was equipped with more security than a bank vault. Cameras covered every entrance, motion sensors monitored the perimeter, and a new deadbolt system required a code I could barely remember. Michael seemed satisfied, though he still insisted on sleeping in the guest room. I lay awake that night, listening to the unfamiliar house settle around me. Every creak of the floorboards, every whisper of wind against the windows felt loaded with threat. The photograph of Richard and the mystery woman sat on my nightstand, her face illuminated by moonlight filtering through the curtains. Who was she? And why had someone waited 3 years after Richard's death to reveal her existence? Sleep came in fragments, disturbed by dreams of empty graves and strangers with pale blue eyes. When dawn finally broke, I rose feeling more exhausted than when I'd gone to bed. Michael was already in the kitchen, coffee brewing, his laptop open on the table. He looked up as I entered. Morning, Mom. I've been researching Pinewood Ridge Medical Center. Want to see what I found? I poured myself coffee and sat beside him. The screen showed archived newspaper articles, business records, and incorporation documents. The center opened in 1982, Michael said, clicking through pages. Specialized in long-term care and rehabilitation. But here's what's interesting. It was partially funded by Meridian Industries. My hand froze halfway to my coffee cup. Meridian Industries. That's where your father worked. Exactly. Dad did their accounting for 30 years. But according to these records, Meridian wasn't just a manufacturing company. They had investments in several medical facilities, including Pinewood Ridge. Why would a manufacturing company invest in medical centers? Michael's expression darkened. I don't know, but I found something else. In 1987, there was an investigation into Pinewood Ridge, some kind of financial irregularities. The investigation was dropped, but not before several administrators resigned. Does it mention your father? No, but the timing's interesting. According to his employment records, which I pulled last night from his old files in the study, Dad took a 6-month leave of absence in 1987. Medical reasons, the records say. I set down my coffee cup. He never took a medical leave, at least not that I remember. Are you sure? 1987 was almost 40 years ago. I searched my memory. 1987. Michael would have been 7, Susan 5, Antonio just 2 years old. It had been a busy year, chaotic with 3 young children. But Richard taking 6 months off work? Surely I would have remembered that. Unless I wasn't supposed to. What else did you find? I asked. Michael hesitated. Mom, are you sure you want to keep digging? We could still take all of this to the police. Let them investigate. Show me what you found, Michael. He clicked to a new page. Meridian Industries filed for bankruptcy in 1998. Same year Pinewood Ridge closed. Both went down together, along with 2 other medical facilities they'd funded. There were lawsuits, allegations of insurance fraud, patients claiming negligence. It was a huge scandal. I don't remember any of this. Dad would have been right in the middle of it. He was their lead accountant. But I can't find any record of him being questioned or implicated. It's like he just vanished from the paper trail. My phone buzzed. A text from Susan. Found him. You're not going to believe this. On my way back. Don't do anything until I get there. Michael saw my expression. What is it? Susan found the stranger. We waited in tense silence, Michael working on his laptop while I pretended to read the newspaper. But my mind was elsewhere, piecing together fragments that didn't quite fit. Richard's leave of absence, the medical center, the mysterious woman. All of it connected somehow. A web of secrets that had stayed hidden for decades. Susan arrived at 10:30, looking like she hadn't slept. She carried a manila folder thick with documents. His name is Robert Hastings, she said without preamble, dropping the folder on the kitchen table. Age 73. Former private investigator, now retired. Lives in Bay City, about 90 miles north. I pulled out the documents. Robert Hastings's face stared back at me from what looked like an old license. The same narrow nose, pale blue eyes, weathered skin. That's him, I confirmed. But why would a private investigator approach me at a flower shop? Susan sat down heavily. Because someone hired him. My contact tracked down some of his old case files. Hastings specialized in missing persons and financial investigations. He worked several high-profile cases in the 80s and 90s. Did he work on the Meridian Industries case? Michael asked. Not officially. But get this. He was hired in 1987 by an attorney representing patients from Pinewood Ridge Medical Center. They were building a class action lawsuit against Meridian. The pieces were starting to form a picture, ugly and incomplete. There's more, Susan said quietly. I had my investigator do some additional digging. Mom, do you remember Dad's life insurance policy? Of course. It paid out when he died. $300,000. That's the standard policy through his employer. But there was another one. A private policy he took out in 1988. It paid out $500,000. I stared at her. That's impossible. I would have known about a policy that large. The beneficiary wasn't you. Susan's voice was gentle but firm. It was a woman named Catherine Monroe. The name meant nothing to me. Who is Catherine Monroe? Susan pulled out another photograph. A copy of the one left in my house. I think this is her. My investigator found a marriage certificate. In 1985, Richard Bates married Catherine Monroe in Grayson County. The room tilted. Michael caught my arm, steadying me. That's not possible, I whispered. We were married in 1981. Richard couldn't have married someone else. That would make him a bigamist, Susan finished. Yes. The word hung in the air like poison. My husband, loyal, boring Richard who did tax returns and mowed the lawn every Saturday, had married another woman while married to me, had maintained a second life, a second family perhaps, for years without me knowing. The marriage certificate was filed in Grayson County, Susan continued. Same county where Pinewood Ridge Medical Center operated. Catherine Monroe worked there as an administrator from 1983 to 1998. What happened to her? My voice sounded distant, disconnected. I don't know yet. Public records show she left Michigan in 1998, around the time everything collapsed. No death certificate, no forwarding address. She just disappeared. Michael was reading through the documents, his face growing paler. Mom, there's a property deed here. A house in Grayson County, purchased in 1986 under both Richard's and Catherine's names. Show me. He handed me the deed. There it was in black and white. Richard's signature next to a woman's I'd never met, buying a house together. A home. While I was at our farmhouse in Millbrook, raising his children, cooking his dinners, sleeping in his bed. I need air. I stood abruptly and walked to the back porch, my children calling after me. But I needed space, needed to breathe without their worried eyes watching my reaction. How long had he maintained both lives? How had he managed it? The logistics alone seemed impossible. 2 wives, 2 homes, presumably 2 entirely separate existences. I thought about all those business trips to Grayson County, all those late nights working. Had he been with her? Building a life while lying to me? The worst part wasn't the betrayal, though that cut deep enough. The worst part was realizing I'd never truly known him at all. 41 years together, and the man I'd buried had been a stranger. Susan came out onto the porch. Mom, don't. I held up my hand. I need a minute. We have to figure out what to do. If Dad was involved in the Meridian scandal, if he had another wife, another life, this is bigger than grave desecration. Someone is sending you these messages for a reason. Obviously. My voice came out sharper than intended. Someone wants me to know Richard was a liar and a fraud. Congratulations to them. Message received. I don't think that's all they want. Susan leaned against the porch railing. Think about it. They could have just sent you the photograph. They could have contacted you anonymously. But they didn't. They dug up Dad's grave. They made it public. Spectacular. They want everyone to know something. She was right. This wasn't about hurting me privately. This was about exposure. About revealing something that had stayed hidden for decades. The body, I said suddenly. They took Richard's body. Why? Michael had joined us on the porch. Maybe there's something about it they needed. Medical evidence, DNA, something that proves... His phone rang, cutting him off. He answered, listened, then his expression changed dramatically. We'll be right there. What is it? Susan asked. That was Detective Morrison. She wants us to come to the station. They found something in Dad's grave. 20 minutes later, we sat in a small conference room at the Millbrook Police Department. Detective Morrison entered carrying an evidence bag containing what looked like a metal box, dirty and dented but intact. We found this at the bottom of the grave, she said. It was buried beneath where the casket should have been. The grave diggers from 3 years ago wouldn't have seen it. It was too deep, covered with concrete. What's in it? I asked. We don't know yet. It's locked, and we need proper authorization before opening it. But there's an engraving on the top. She turned the box so we could see. Etched into the metal. For Glenda, the truth will free you. My breath caught. Someone had buried this box before Richard died, maybe years before. Someone had placed it precisely where his casket would eventually rest, ensuring it would only be found if the grave was excavated. Mrs. Bates, Detective Morrison said carefully, I need to ask you some questions. Did your husband ever mention burying something? Did he leave any instructions about this? No, I had no idea. What about safety deposit boxes, storage units, any place he might have kept documents or valuables? Just the safety deposit box at First National Bank. We kept important papers there. Deeds, wills, birth certificates. We'll need to access that box. Susan spoke up. Detective, we've discovered some information about my father that might be relevant to your investigation. I shot her a warning look, but she ignored it. Over the next 30 minutes, she laid out everything we'd found. The marriage certificate, the property deed, the Meridian Industries connection, Robert Hastings. Detective Morrison listened without interrupting, her expression growing more serious with each revelation. When Susan finished, Morrison leaned back in her chair. This changes everything. What we initially thought was simple grave desecration is actually connected to a financial scandal from the 90s. And possibly to a missing person. This Catherine Monroe. You think something happened to her? Michael asked. I think your father was involved in something significant enough that someone wants the truth exposed 27 years later. And they're willing to go to extreme lengths to make it happen. Morrison stood and gathered the evidence bag. I'm going to need all the documents you've collected. And Mrs. Bates, I strongly suggest you consider staying somewhere else until we sort this out. If your husband was involved in criminal activity, if money or evidence is hidden somewhere, you could be in danger. I'm not leaving my home, I said firmly. Then at least accept police protection. I can have an officer stationed outside your house. Before I could refuse, Michael spoke up. She'll take it. Thank you, Detective. I wanted to argue, but the truth was I was frightened. Not of physical danger, but of what we might discover next. Each new revelation painted Richard as more of a stranger, and I wasn't sure how many more lies I could absorb before my entire past unraveled completely. We left the police station under gray skies that threatened rain. As Michael drove us back to the farmhouse, I stared out the window at familiar streets that suddenly felt foreign. Everything I'd thought I knew about my life was built on deception. Mom, Susan said from the back seat, we're going to figure this out. Whatever Dad did, whatever happened, we'll find the truth. But I wasn't sure I wanted the truth anymore. Some secrets, once exposed, destroy everything they touch. And I had a terrible feeling we'd only scratched the surface of Richard's lies. Back home, Michael made lunch while Susan returned to her laptop, searching for more information about Catherine Monroe. I sat at the kitchen table, numb, staring at the metal box in the evidence photo Morrison had given us. For Glenda, the truth will free you. Free me from what? From my ignorance? From my comfortable delusions about my marriage? My phone buzzed. An unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me press accept. Mrs. Bates. The voice was male, unfamiliar, slightly raspy. I'm glad you're starting to understand. Who is this? Someone who knew your husband very well. Better than you did, certainly. Did you like the photograph? My blood ran cold. You broke into my house. I gave you a gift. The first of many. Richard Bates wasn't who you thought he was, and before this is over, you'll wish he'd stayed buried. What do you want? Justice. Truth. Richard stole something precious, and now it's time to pay the debt. Check your mailbox, Glenda. I've left you another present. The line went dead. I ran to the front door, Michael calling after me. The mailbox at the end of the driveway stood innocent in the afternoon sun. I opened it with trembling hands. Inside was another envelope. Another photograph. This one showed Richard and Catherine Monroe with a child. A little girl, perhaps 4 years old, with Richard's eyes and Catherine's dark hair. On the back, some truths can't stay buried forever. Richard hadn't just had another wife. He'd had another daughter. I stood at the mailbox, staring at the photograph of Richard's secret daughter, while the world seemed to tilt beneath my feet. The little girl couldn't have been more than 4 years old, her hand clasped in Catherine's, her smile so innocent and trusting. She looked nothing like my children, yet undeniably carried Richard's features. His strong brow, the shape of his nose, that particular way of tilting her head. Michael appeared at my side. Mom, what is it? I handed him the photograph without speaking. I watched his face cycle through the same emotions I'd just experienced. Confusion, recognition, horror. He had a daughter, Michael whispered. We have a half-sister. Susan joined us, took one look at the photo, and said a word I'd never heard her use before. This is unbelievable. How did he manage this? How did he hide an entire family? The same way he hid everything else, I said quietly. By lying every single day. We returned to the house. Michael immediately called Detective Morrison to report the anonymous call and the new photograph. Within an hour, she arrived with 2 other officers and a technician to examine our phone records and dust the mailbox for fingerprints. The call came from a burner phone, Morrison told us after checking with her team. Purchased with cash 3 days ago at a convenience store in Grayson County. We're pulling security footage, but I doubt we'll find much. What about the photograph? Susan asked. Can you trace it? We'll try. But this appears to be a copy of an older print, probably from the mid-80s based on the photo quality. Whoever's behind this has been planning for a long time. Morrison turned to me. Mrs. Bates, I need you to think carefully. Did your husband have any enemies? Anyone who might want revenge or have a grudge? I thought I knew my husband, Detective. Clearly, I was wrong about everything. What about business associates? People he worked with at Meridian Industries? He never brought work problems home. He kept that part of his life separate. I paused, then added bitterly, apparently, he kept many things separate. After Morrison left, promising to post an officer outside for the night, I retreated to Richard's study. I'd barely entered this room since his death. It had been his sanctuary, filled with his accounting books, his files, his carefully organized life. Now it felt like a crime scene waiting to be investigated. Susan found me there 20 minutes later, pulling files from the cabinet. Mom, what are you looking for? Anything. Everything. He kept meticulous records of everything he did. There has to be something here that explains all of this. The police are handling the investigation now. You should rest. Rest? I looked at her. Susan, my entire marriage was a lie. My husband had another wife, another daughter. He was involved in financial fraud. His body has been stolen, and someone is terrorizing me with photographs. I don't need rest. I need answers. She knelt beside me, her voice gentle. I understand you're hurt, but you're not thinking clearly. Let the professionals handle this. You sound just like your father. The words came out sharp, accusatory. Always so certain you know what's best for me. Always treating me like I'm incapable of handling difficult things. Susan flinched. That's not fair, isn't it? You and Michael have been managing me since the moment this started. Deciding what I should do, where I should stay, who I should talk to. You inherited that from Richard. That certainty that I need to be protected and controlled. We're trying to help. Then help me search. I turned back to the files. Stop trying to protect me from the truth. She hesitated, then joined me. Together we pulled out decades of documents, tax returns, investment records, bank statements. Richard had been nothing if not organized. Every receipt, every transaction, carefully filed and labeled. But as we searched, I began to notice gaps. Missing months in certain years. Transactions that didn't quite make sense. And then I found it. A ledger, hidden at the back of the bottom drawer with no label. I opened it carefully. Inside were handwritten entries in Richard's precise script, dating from 1985 to 1998. Numbers, dates, initials I didn't recognize, and recurring entries marked simply CM, Catherine Monroe. What is this? Susan peered over my shoulder. I think it's his secret accounting. His second life, recorded in code. The entries were cryptic but followed a pattern. Monthly payments to CM, ranging from $500 to $2,000. Larger sums marked with different initials, MI, PR, ST, and notes in the margins. Patient trust transfer, insurance adjustment, administrative correction. This is evidence of financial fraud, Susan said, her attorney instincts taking over. These look like patient fund transfers, insurance money being redirected. Mom, Dad was embezzling from Pinewood Ridge, or from Meridian Industries, or both. Michael appeared in the doorway. The police officer is here, stationed outside. Also, I got a call from Antonio. He and Claire are driving up tomorrow morning. He wanted to wait, but Claire insisted they come now. I barely heard him. I was staring at an entry from March 1987. Final transfer. Account closed. Loose ends secured. And beside it, a note in Richard's handwriting. Catherine knows too much. Situation contained. What does that mean? I asked. Situation contained? Susan's face had gone pale. Mom, we need to give this to Detective Morrison right now. Why? What are you thinking? I'm thinking that Catherine Monroe disappeared in 1998, and Dad might have had something to do with it. The implication hung heavy in the room. Murder. My husband, boring, methodical Richard, capable of murder. It seemed impossible. Yet so had everything else I'd learned in the past 2 days. We don't know that, Michael said quickly. Maybe she just left. Maybe she wanted to disappear. With her daughter? Susan countered. What mother abandons a child? Unless she didn't abandon her, I said quietly. Unless something happened to both of them. The thought made me sick. That little girl in the photograph, no older than 4. What had become of her? If Catherine had disappeared in 1998, the girl would have been a teenager. Where was she now? Did she even know Richard had been her father? My phone rang. Another unknown number. Don't answer it, Susan said. But I did. I needed to know who was behind this. What they wanted. Glenda. The same raspy voice from before. I see you found Richard's ledger. Very thorough. You're smarter than he gave you credit for. Who are you? What do you want from me? I want what Richard took. Money, evidence, the truth about what happened to Catherine and her daughter. He made sure no one would ever find them. But I will. And you're going to help me. I don't know anything about Catherine or her daughter. You're learning, though. You're discovering just what kind of man you married. A thief, a liar, and possibly much worse. If you know so much, why do you need me? Because Richard left something behind, something valuable, and he made sure only you could find it. That box buried in his grave? That's just the beginning. He left you clues, Glenda. A treasure hunt from beyond the grave. How romantic. I don't understand. You will. Check your email. I've sent you the next piece of the puzzle. And Glenda, you have 48 hours to find what Richard hid, or I go public with everything. His fraud, his bigamy, his crimes. Your children will be destroyed by association. Michael's business, Susan's law career, all ruined. Unless you give me what I want. The line went dead. My hands were shaking as I opened my email on my phone. There was a new message from an encrypted address. No subject line. Inside was a scanned document. A bank statement from 1998 showing a wire transfer of $2 million from a Meridian Industries account to an offshore bank in the Cayman Islands. Richard's signature authorized the transfer. And attached was another photograph. Catherine Monroe and the little girl. But this one was different. They looked frightened. Catherine's face bruised, the girl crying. On the back of the digital image, a caption, 3 days before they disappeared. Susan read the message over my shoulder. He's blackmailing you. This is extortion. He's doing more than that, Michael said grimly. He's accusing Dad of hurting them. Maybe worse. I stared at Catherine's bruised face, at the terrified child. Had Richard done this? Had the man I slept beside for 41 years been capable of violence? We're calling Detective Morrison, Susan said firmly. Right now. This has gone too far. But before she could dial, the doorbell rang. We all froze. The police officer was stationed outside. He would have stopped anyone suspicious from approaching. Michael went to answer it. Through the study door, I heard him talking to someone, then exclaiming in shock. He returned with a woman, probably in her early 40s, with dark hair streaked with gray and familiar eyes. Richard's eyes. Mom, Michael said, his voice strained. This is Nicole. She says she's Dad's daughter. The young woman, Nicole, stood in the doorway, nervous but determined. Mrs. Bates, I know this is a shock, but I need to talk to you about my mother, about Catherine Monroe. I need to know what your husband did to her. I couldn't speak. I could only stare at this living proof of Richard's betrayal, at the daughter he'd kept secret, who'd somehow found me. Susan found her voice first. How did you find us? The same person who's been contacting Mrs. Bates contacted me 3 days ago. Sent me proof that Richard Bates was my father, told me about his death, about his grave being opened. They said if I wanted answers about what happened to my mother, I needed to come here. Who contacted you? Michael demanded. I don't know. But they knew things, private things about my childhood, about my mother's disappearance. They knew I've been searching for her for 25 years. I finally found my voice. Your mother disappeared in 1998? Nicole nodded, tears forming. I was 13. She dropped me at school one morning and never came back. I waited at the pickup area for hours. The school called the police. They searched but found nothing. No body, No evidence of where she went. My grandmother took me in, raised me. I've been looking for answers ever since. And you think Richard had something to do with her disappearance? Susan asked carefully. I think he's the only person who could explain what happened. But he's dead. Nicole looked at me with desperate eyes. Whatever he did, whatever he hid, I need to know. I need to find my mother, even if I can only give her a proper burial. The room fell silent. Here was Richard's secret daughter, flesh and blood, asking me to help uncover potentially terrible truths about the man I'd loved, the man we'd all loved, in our different ways. The person who contacted you, I said slowly. Did they say what they wanted? They said you would have something Richard left behind. Evidence. They said if we worked together, we could find the truth. Nicole pulled out her phone. They sent me this. She showed me a photograph. It was the metal box from Richard's grave, but in this image it was open. Inside I could see papers, what looked like a USB drive, and a small leather journal. They have the box, Michael said. The police evidence. Someone stole it. Susan's phone rang. She answered, listened. Then her face went white. Detective Morrison just got called to the evidence room. The box is gone. Someone broke into the police station and took it. The caller, whoever was orchestrating all of this, had just escalated dramatically. They'd stolen evidence from a police station. They'd brought Richard's secret daughter to my doorstep, and they'd given us 48 hours to find something we didn't understand. We need protection, Michael said. Real protection. This person is dangerous. But I was thinking about the ledger, about Richard's meticulous nature. He wouldn't have left just one record. He always kept backups, copies, redundancies. If that box contained evidence, he would have hidden more somewhere else. Nicole, I said, did your mother ever give you anything? Any gift or keepsake from your father? She thought for a moment. There was a music box. She gave it to me the day before she disappeared. Said it was important, that I should keep it safe. I still have it. Where is it? In my car. I brought everything I thought might be relevant. Get it, please. While Nicole went to her car, Susan pulled me aside. Mom, we can't trust her. We don't know if she's really Dad's daughter. This could be part of the blackmail scheme. She has his eyes, I said simply. I know my husband's eyes. Michael joined us. Susan's right. We need to verify her identity before sharing anything. There's no time for that. We have 48 hours, and whoever's behind this is watching us. They brought Nicole here for a reason. Nicole returned with a small wooden music box, beautifully carved with roses. She opened it carefully. A soft melody played, Beethoven's Für Elise, while the interior revealed a velvet-lined compartment containing a folded piece of paper. I unfolded it with trembling hands. It was a letter, addressed to Nicole, in Richard's handwriting. My dearest Nicole, if you're reading this, then something has happened to me or your mother. I'm sorry for the secrets, for the lies, for the danger I've brought into your life. I thought I could protect you both by keeping you hidden. I was wrong. There's something you need to know, something I've hidden in a place only Glenda can find. If you're with her now, show her this letter. She'll understand where to look. The house where we first said, I love you. The place where our life together truly began. Under the oak tree 3 feet down. Find it before they do. And Nicole, I loved your mother. I loved you. Some truths are too terrible to speak, but you deserve to know. I'm sorry I couldn't be the father you deserved. R. I read the letter twice, my mind racing. The house where we first said, I love you. For me and Richard, that was the farmhouse. My parents' property, which we'd inherited and made our own. We'd stood under the oak tree in the backyard the night he proposed, both of us young and full of dreams. He buried something here, I said, on this property. Or he's sending you somewhere else, Susan cautioned. Mom, this could be a trap. But I knew Richard's handwriting, his way of phrasing things. This was real. He'd left us instructions, a path to follow. We need to dig, I said. Tonight. Under the oak tree in the backyard. Michael looked skeptical. Mom, it's almost midnight, and we have an officer watching the house. How do we explain digging up the backyard? I don't care. We're running out of time. Nicole spoke up quietly. I brought a shovel. In my trunk. I thought I might need it. She'd come prepared to dig up secrets, literally. I appreciated her determination, her need for answers that matched my own. Then let's do it, I said. An hour later, we stood in the backyard under the ancient oak tree, flashlights illuminating our work while the police officer watched from a distance, confused but not interfering. Michael and Nicole took turns digging while Susan and I kept watch. At 3 feet down, the shovel hit something solid. Metal. We cleared away the dirt to reveal another box, larger than the one from the grave, sealed with a combination lock, and engraved on top, the date we became us. Our wedding date. June 15th, 1981. My hands shook as I entered the numbers. 06-15-81. The lock clicked open. Inside were documents, financial records, legal papers, photographs, and a USB drive labeled Insurance. Richard's insurance policy, not the monetary kind, but the kind that keeps you alive when you know too much. Susan pulled out a folder marked Catherine Monroe, full account. Inside was a detailed record of everything Richard had done, written in his own hand like a confession. I met Catherine in 1983. I loved Glenda, but Catherine understood the part of me I kept hidden. We married in secret in 1985. I thought I could maintain both lives. I was a fool. When Meridian began their illegal activities, I was forced to participate. They threatened my family. Both families. I helped them steal from patient trust funds, redirect insurance payments, hide assets. I kept records of everything as protection. When Catherine learned the truth, she wanted to go to the authorities. I couldn't let her. Too many people would be destroyed, including Nicole. I gave Catherine a choice. Disappear and stay silent, or face consequences I didn't want to consider. She chose to disappear. I helped her create a new identity, gave her money to start over. She's alive, somewhere safe, away from all of this. Nicole, if you're reading this, your mother didn't abandon you. She saved you. And I'm sorry for all the lies. Nicole's tears fell onto the paper. She's alive. She's alive, and she left me. She left to protect you, I said gently, though my own heart was breaking. Richard forced her to choose. Susan was reading through the financial documents. These records incriminate dozens of people, Meridian executives, doctors, administrators. This is evidence of millions in fraud and theft. And that's why someone wants it, Michael said. These people would do anything to keep this quiet. The pieces finally clicked into place. Someone connected to Meridian's crimes. Someone who'd managed to escape prosecution. Knew Richard had kept insurance. They'd waited until he was dead, then orchestrated this elaborate scheme to flush out the evidence. They'd opened the grave, sent the photographs, brought Nicole to me, all to force me to find what Richard had hidden. And I'd done exactly what they wanted. We need to get this to Detective Morrison, Susan said. Right now. But as we gathered the documents, headlights swept across the backyard. A car pulled into the driveway, and I heard the police officer shouting. Then a gunshot. We all dropped to the ground behind the oak tree. More shots rang out. Get inside, Michael yelled, grabbing the box. We ran for the house as the shooting continued. Glass shattered somewhere, a window breaking. The back door was closer, and we scrambled through it into the kitchen. Call 911! Susan shouted, already on her phone. I pulled Nicole down behind the kitchen island while Michael crouched at the window, trying to see what was happening. The shooting stopped, replaced by an eerie silence. Then my phone buzzed with a text from the unknown number. 48 hours are up. Give me the box or your family dies. You have 10 minutes to bring it outside. Come alone, or everyone in that house becomes collateral damage. Mom, no. Michael grabbed my arm as I started toward the door. You're not going out there. He'll kill all of you if I don't. The police are on their way, Susan said, her voice tight. We just need to wait. We don't have time to wait. That officer outside might already be dead. I pulled free from Michael's grip. This person has been planning this for years. They've thought of everything. If I don't go out there with the box, they'll find another way to get it, and people will die. Nicole spoke up from behind the island. What if we give them a fake box? Buy time? They'll know. I said. Whoever this is, they knew about Richard's ledger, about the letter in the music box, about everything. They've been watching us this entire time. Susan was reading through Richard's documents with frantic speed. Wait, Mom, look at this. At the end of Richard's confession, there's a name. Dr. Samuel Turner. He was the medical director at Pinewood Ridge. Richard says Turner was the one orchestrating everything. The fraud, the threats. He forced Richard to help by threatening both families. Is Turner still alive? Michael asked. I'll search. Susan typed rapidly on her phone. Here, Dr. Samuel Turner, age 78, retired. Last known address in Grayson County. Mom, there's a photo. She held up her phone. I saw a man with weathered features, a narrow nose, and pale blue eyes. Robert Hastings, the stranger at the flower shop. He's not a private investigator, I said slowly, understanding flooding through me. Susan's contact must have found false records. Turner created a fake identity years ago, Robert Hastings, to hide from the investigation. So Turner is outside right now, Michael said. The man behind everything. My phone buzzed again. 9 minutes. I made my decision. I'm going out, but not with the real box. I looked at Michael. Do we have anything similar? Same size? Same weight? He thought for a moment. Dad's old toolbox in the garage. Metal, about the same dimensions. Get it. Fill it with something heavy. Tools, books, anything. Susan, keep those documents hidden. If something happens to me, you give them to Detective Morrison. Promise me. Mom, promise me. She nodded, tears in her eyes. I promise. Michael returned with the toolbox, now weighted with wrenches and old hammers. It looked convincing enough in the dark. I took it, feeling its heft, and started toward the back door. Wait. Nicole stood up. Let me come with you. He's expecting one person, but maybe we can use the distraction. I can circle around while you talk to him. Absolutely not, I said. You just found out your mother is alive. You're not risking your life. My mother left because she was threatened by this man. He's the reason I grew up without her. I have as much right to confront him as you do. There was steel in her voice, Richard's determination mixed with something fiercer. I saw myself in her, a woman refusing to be protected, demanding to face danger on her own terms. All right, I said, but you follow my lead. Susan grabbed my hand. Mom, please be careful. I've survived 64 years, raised 3 children, and discovered my husband led a double life. I think I can handle one bitter old man. I said it with more confidence than I felt. But as I stepped toward the door, something clicked in my mind. All those years managing the household, the finances, dealing with Richard's careful evasions, I'd learned to read between lines, to spot inconsistencies, to plan 3 steps ahead. Turner might have orchestrated this elaborate scheme, but he'd made one critical mistake. He'd underestimated me. Nicole and I slipped out the back door. The yard was dark except for the sweep of police lights approaching in the distance. The officer's car sat empty, driver's door open. I didn't see a body, which gave me hope he'd managed to take cover. Mrs. Bates. Turner's voice came from the shadows near the oak tree. Right on time. I appreciate punctuality. I walked forward slowly, the fake toolbox heavy in my arms. Nicole melted into the darkness, circling wide as we'd planned. Turner stepped into the moonlight, and I saw him clearly for the first time. Not the briefly glimpsed stranger from the flower shop, but the man who'd destroyed so many lives. He held a gun loosely at his side, confident in his control of the situation. You've been very thorough, he said. Found the ledger, the letter, the box. Richard trained you well, even if he didn't know it. You were the medical director, I said, stalling for time. You forced Richard to help you steal from patients. I created opportunities. Richard chose to participate. He could have refused, could have gone to the authorities. But he wanted the money, wanted to maintain both his perfect families. So he helped me hide millions in offshore accounts. And when Catherine found out, you threatened her. Turner smiled coldly. Catherine was a problem. She had principles, wanted to do the right thing. People with principles are so inconvenient. Richard convinced her to disappear, But I knew she'd kept copies of documents. Insurance, just like Richard did. I've been searching for 25 years. Why wait until now? Why not force Richard to tell you while he was alive? Because Richard was useful. He knew how to hide assets, launder money through legitimate channels. As long as he was alive, I could use him if needed. But when he died, I knew his evidence would surface eventually. His conscience had been eating at him for years. So I expedited the process. The sirens were getting closer. Turner heard them too. His grip on the gun tightened. "The box," he demanded. "Now." I set it down and stepped back. "It's all there. Everything Richard hid." Turner kept the gun trained on me as he knelt and opened the toolbox. For a moment, his face registered confusion, then rage as he realized the deception. "Where is it?" He stood abruptly, pointing the gun at my chest. "Where are the real documents?" "Somewhere you'll never find them. I'll kill you. I'll kill everyone in that house." "No, you won't." My voice was steady, calmer than I'd imagined possible. "Because you're not getting out of here. The police are 30 seconds away. You have two choices. Run now and disappear, or stay and spend the rest of your life in prison. You think you're clever, old woman? You think you've won? I think I've survived longer than you expected. I think Richard underestimated me. And so did you. Men like you always do." His finger moved toward the trigger. Time seemed to slow. I thought of my children in the house, of Nicole circling in the darkness, of Richard's betrayals and secrets, and I thought about how tired I was of being dismissed, controlled, underestimated. That's when Nicole emerged from the shadows behind Turner, holding a large branch from the oak tree. She swung it hard against the back of his knees. Turner stumbled, the gun firing wild into the ground as he fell. I lunged forward and kicked the weapon away, years of suppressed fury giving me strength I didn't know I had. Turner scrambled after it, but Michael burst from the house and tackled him to the ground, pinning him there while Susan called for the police. 3 squad cars screeched into the driveway, officers flooding the yard with weapons drawn. Detective Morrison led them, taking in the scene with sharp eyes. "Arrest him," I said, pointing at Turner. "That's Dr. Samuel Turner. He's wanted for fraud, extortion, and attempted murder. And I have all the evidence you need." As officers handcuffed Turner and read him his rights, Morrison turned to me. "Mrs. Bates, are you all right?" "I'm fine." And surprisingly, I was. My hands were steady, my mind clear. Susan emerged from the house with the box of real documents. "Detective, this contains evidence of a 25-year-old fraud scheme involving Meridian Industries and Pinewood Ridge Medical Center. My father was involved, but he was coerced. This man," she pointed at Turner, "orchestrated everything." Morrison took the box carefully. "We'll need full statements from all of you." "Of course," I said. "But first, there's something else you need to know. Catherine Monroe, the woman who disappeared in 1998, is still alive. Richard helped her create a new identity. She's out there somewhere, and she deserves to know she's safe now, that Turner can't hurt her anymore." Nicole stood beside me, tears streaming down her face. "Can you find her? My mother?" Morrison's expression softened. "We'll do everything we can. With this evidence, we can reopen the case, track down the identity Richard created for her." The police officer who'd been stationed outside limped over, supported by a paramedic. He'd been shot in the leg, but had managed to take cover and radio for backup. He'd saved our lives by delaying Turner's assault. As the chaos of the crime scene unfolded around us, evidence being collected, statements being taken, Turner being loaded into a police car, I found myself standing under the oak tree where this had all begun. The hole we'd dug was still there, a wound in the earth that mirrored the wounds in our family. Michael put his arm around me. "Mom, I'm sorry for treating you like you couldn't handle this. You were incredible tonight. You were trying to protect me. I understand, but I'm not fragile, Michael. I never was." Susan joined us, Nicole beside her. My daughter looked at Richard's secret daughter with an expression I couldn't quite read. Not hostility, but not acceptance either. It would take time. "What do we do now?" Susan asked. "With all of this?" "We heal," I said simply. "We learn to live with the truth. And we help Nicole find her mother." Nicole looked at me with Richard's eyes. eyes I'd loved for 41 years, now looking at me from a face I'd never known existed. Thank you. For helping me. For not turning me away. You're his daughter. That makes you family, whether we planned it or not. Antonio called again, frantic. Having heard news of the shooting, I assured him I was fine, that we'd explain everything when he arrived. Detective Morrison was directing officers, examining the evidence, piecing together the full scope of Turner's crimes. The night was fading toward dawn when Morrison finally approached me again. Mrs. Bates, we've gone through the preliminary documents. The evidence your husband kept is extensive. We'll be able to prosecute not just Turner, but several others involved in the fraud. This could lead to recovered assets for the victims' families. Richard would want that, I said. Whatever else he was, whatever lies he told, he felt guilty about what happened. That's why he kept the records. Did you know? Morrison asked gently. About any of this? No. I knew Richard as an accountant who came home tired, who played with his children, who kissed me goodnight. I didn't know the man who married another woman, who helped steal from dying patients, who forced the mother of his child to disappear. I married a stranger, Detective. I just didn't know it until now. Morrison nodded. I'm sorry. That can't be easy. Nothing about this has been easy, but I'm still standing, and Turner isn't. As the sun rose over Millbrook, painting the farmhouse in shades of gold and amber, I stood in my backyard surrounded by police tape and evidence markers, my children beside me, my husband's secret daughter standing uncertainly at the edge of our family circle. Richard's empty grave had opened more than just earth. It had exposed decades of lies, revealed truths that would reshape everything we thought we knew. But it had also revealed something else. My own strength, my capacity to face horror and betrayal, and still stand firm. Turner had called me an old woman, had dismissed me as weak and manageable. He'd thought he could manipulate me into finding Richard's evidence, then simply take it and disappear. He'd been wrong. Richard had been wrong too, in his way. He'd kept me separate from his secrets, thinking he was protecting me, but protection had only been another form of control, another way of saying I couldn't handle the truth. I could handle it. I had handled it, and I would continue handling whatever came next. 3 weeks after Turner's arrest, I stood in the kitchen of the farmhouse making coffee, the same ritual I'd performed thousands of times, but everything felt different now. The morning light still painted the countryside in amber, the old Buick still sat in the garage, the house still creaked in familiar ways. But I wasn't the same woman who'd bought chrysanthemums that Wednesday morning and discovered her world was built on lies. I was stronger now, clearer. The FBI had taken over the investigation from Detective Morrison, their scope expanding as they uncovered the full extent of the Meridian Industries fraud. Turner's arrest had opened floodgates. Other conspirators coming forward with plea deals, victims' families finally getting answers after decades of wondering. The case was making national news, though I'd refused all interview requests. Some stories didn't need to be told to the whole world. Some truths were meant for smaller circles. Antonio had stayed for a week after the shooting, hovering protectively until I'd finally told him, firmly but kindly, that I needed space to process everything. Claire had understood better than he did, gently steering him home to Ann Arbor with promises that I'd call daily. Michael had installed more security than I needed, then reluctantly returned to Indianapolis after making me promise to use the panic button system he'd set up. His business was suffering from his absence, though he tried to hide it. I assured him I was fine, that I'd survived worse than being alone in a farmhouse. Susan had been the surprise. She'd taken a leave of absence from her law firm and moved into the guest room, claiming she needed to help organize the legal aftermath. But I knew the truth. She was processing her own grief, her own sense of betrayal. She'd idolized Richard, had followed his example of careful planning and control. Learning he'd built his life on lies had shaken something fundamental in her worldview. We'd had long conversations over tea, mother and daughter finally speaking as equals rather than as protector and protected. She'd apologized for treating me as fragile, for assuming age meant incompetence. I'd forgiven her, understanding that she'd learned it from her father, that pattern of loving control that Richard had perfected. It wasn't all lies, I'd told her one evening as we sat on the back porch. Your father loved you. Loved all of you. That part was real. But he loved someone else too. Had a whole other daughter. Yes, and that doesn't erase what he felt for you. People are complicated, Susan. They contain multitudes of truths, some of them contradictory. She'd looked at me with new respect then. When did you get so wise? I've always been this wise. You just weren't listening. Now, 3 weeks later, Susan was preparing to return to Detroit. We sat at the kitchen table with our coffee, comfortable in our silence, when the doorbell rang. It was Nicole. She'd been coming by twice a week, slowly building a relationship with us that felt both natural and strange. She looked so much like Richard that sometimes I had to look away. But she had Catherine's warmth, her mother's kindness, and something uniquely her own. A resilience born from growing up with questions no one could answer. "Morning," she said, stepping inside. "I hope I'm not too early." "Never," I said. "Coffee? Please." She sat at the table, a manila folder in her hands. "I got a call from the FBI yesterday. They found her." Susan and I both froze. "Your mother?" Nicole nodded, tears already forming. "She's been living in Oregon under the name Sarah Mitchell. She's a teacher. Elementary school. When the FBI agents showed up with proof that Turner was in custody, that it was safe, she broke down crying. "Are you going to see her?" Susan asked gently. "I'm flying out tomorrow. She wants to meet. After 25 years, I'm finally going to see my mother again." Nicole wiped her eyes. She told the agents she thought about me every day, that leaving me was the hardest thing she'd ever done. But Turner had threatened to kill me if she went to the authorities. Richard convinced her that disappearing was the only way to keep me safe. I thought about Catherine, young, frightened, forced to choose between her daughter's safety and her own freedom. She must have been terrified. She was. But she was also brave. She built a new life, even though it meant losing everything. The agent said she's been following the news coverage, knew about Richard's death, about the grave being opened. She said she'd hoped someone would finally uncover the truth. "I'm glad she's safe," I said. And I meant it. Whatever anger I felt toward Richard, whatever betrayal burned in my chest, Catherine had been his victim too. She deserved peace. Nicole opened the folder. There's something else. The FBI found records of the offshore accounts Richard helped Turner create. There's still money there, almost $3 million that was never recovered. The courts are determining how to distribute it to victims' families, but she pulled out a document. Richard left instructions. In his final confession, he specified that if anything happened to him, certain accounts should be divided between you and my mother. He said it was money he'd skimmed off Turner's fraud, his own insurance policy. I looked at the numbers on the page. $1.5 million. Money built on theft and suffering. Blood money dressed in neat bank transfers. "I don't want it," I said immediately. "I told the FBI you might say that. They said if you refuse, it goes into the General Victim Compensation Fund. Then that's where it should go. Those people suffered. They deserve restitution." Susan touched my hand. "Mom, you could use this. The house needs repairs. Your retirement fund took hits when Dad died. I'm not keeping money stolen from dying patients. I don't care what Richard intended. Some things can't be made right with money." Nicole smiled, something warm and genuine. "That's what my mother said too. She's refusing her portion as well. She said she built a good life without blood money, and she's not starting over with it now. Your mother sounds like a good woman. I think you'd like her. She said if you ever wanted to talk, she'd welcome it. She knows how hard this must be for you." I considered it. Part of me wanted nothing to do with Catherine Monroe, the woman who'd shared my husband's bed, who'd given him a daughter while I was home with my own children. But another part, the part that had grown stronger these past weeks, was curious. What had she seen in Richard? What had he been like with her, away from the life he'd built with me? "Maybe someday," I said, "when the wounds aren't so fresh." Nicole nodded, understanding. "There's one more thing." She pulled out a letter, sealed in an evidence bag. "The FBI found this in Richard's safety deposit box at the bank. It's addressed to you. They've cleared it as evidence so you can open it now." My hands trembled as I took it. Richard's handwriting on the envelope. "For Glenda. To be opened only after the truth emerges." He'd known. Somehow he'd known this day would come. I opened it carefully while Susan and Nicole watched. Inside was a single page, dated 6 months before his death. My dearest Glenda, if you're reading this, then my secrets have finally caught up with me. I've spent 30 years trying to outrun them, trying to protect everyone. And in the process, I've hurt the people I loved most. I don't expect forgiveness. What I did, to you, to Catherine, to Nicole, to all those patients whose trust I betrayed, is unforgivable. I told myself I was protecting my families, but the truth is, I was protecting myself. My comfort, my reputation, my carefully constructed life. You deserved better than me. You deserved a husband who trusted you with the truth, who didn't treat you like a child who needed sheltering from difficult realities. You're the strongest person I've ever known, Glenda, even if I never told you that. You raised our children, managed our home, made 1,000 decisions that kept our family together. And I took credit while keeping you in the dark. I'm a coward. I always have been. When Turner threatened me, I should have gone to the authorities. When Catherine discovered the truth, I should have protected her properly instead of helping her run. When I had the chance to make things right, I chose silence instead. But I kept the records. I documented everything, knowing that someday someone would need to expose Turner and the others. I hoped it wouldn't happen until after I was gone, so I wouldn't have to face the consequences. More cowardice. I've left instructions for where to find the evidence. I've tried to make provisions for both you and Catherine, though money can't fix what I've broken. And I've written this letter because I need you to know. None of this was your fault. You were never lacking. You were never insufficient. The failure was entirely mine. Take care of our children. Help them understand that people are complicated, that we can love deeply and still make terrible choices. And if Nicole ever comes to you, if she finds you somehow, please don't turn her away. She's innocent in all of this. She's a good person, like her mother, like you. I loved you, Glenda. That was real, even when everything else was a lie. I just wish I'd loved you enough to be honest. Goodbye, Richard. I read it twice, then set it down gently. My eyes were dry. I'd cried enough for Richard Bates. Mom? Susan's voice was soft. Are you okay? I am. And I meant it. The letter didn't change anything, didn't erase the betrayal, didn't excuse his choices. But it gave me something I needed. Confirmation that I hadn't been blind, hadn't been stupid. Richard had been deliberately deceptive, carefully constructing walls to keep me from seeing the truth. He called himself a coward, Nicole said quietly. He was right. I folded the letter carefully. But at least he knew it. Some people never achieve even that level of self-awareness. Susan cleared our coffee cups, a domestic gesture that felt grounding. What will you do now, Mom? With the house? With everything? I'm staying here. This is my home, bought with honest work and real memories, whatever Richard's lies. I'm not letting his choices drive me out. And the scandal? People in town know now. There's been gossip. Let them gossip. I've done nothing wrong. I won't apologize for being deceived by someone who spent decades perfecting his deceptions. Nicole stood, gathering her folder. I should go. I have packing to do before my flight tomorrow. But Glenda, thank you. For not hating me, for helping me find my mother. You have nothing to thank me for. We're family, whether Richard planned it that way or not. After she left, Susan and I sat in comfortable silence. Through the window, I could see the oak tree where we'd dug up Richard's confession, the hole now filled and grassed over. The yard looked normal again, peaceful. Only we knew what secrets had been buried there. I misjudged you, Susan said finally. All these years I thought you were, I don't know, traditional, simple, someone who needed taking care of. And now I think you're the strongest person I know. You faced all of this. Dad's betrayal, Turner's threats, the possibility of violence, and you never broke. You figured out what needed to be done, and you did it. I did what anyone would do. No, Mom. Most people would have fallen apart. You got stronger. She was leaving the next morning, returning to her life in Detroit. Michael had called yesterday, saying his business was recovering, asking if I needed anything. Antonio sent daily texts, usually pictures of his children. My grandchildren, who deserved better stories about their grandfather than the truth would provide. I'd have to figure out what to tell them eventually. Not lies, but not the full, brutal truth either. Children needed heroes, needed to believe their grandfather had been good. I could give them that much, even if it meant carrying the weight of Richard's reality alone. But I wasn't really alone. I had my children, flawed and loving. I had Nicole now, tentatively becoming part of our family. I had Catherine out in Oregon, building a relationship through careful emails and phone calls, two women bound by the same complicated man. And I had myself, Glenda Bates, 64 years old, survivor of betrayal and violence and the systematic undermining of 41 years of marriage. I'd discovered I was capable of investigation, of confrontation, of courage I hadn't known I possessed. Richard had tried to protect me by keeping me ignorant. He'd thought knowledge would break me. He'd been wrong. Knowledge had freed me. That evening, after Susan left for Detroit with promises to visit soon, I stood alone in the farmhouse that had witnessed so much history. Birthdays and anniversaries, homework sessions and Christmas mornings, Richard's quiet lies, and my own unknowing contentment. The house felt different now. Not tainted, exactly, but transformed. It was still my home, but now it was mine alone. Not Richard and Glenda's place, but just Glenda's. A woman who'd raised 3 children, buried a husband, exposed decades of fraud, and survived threats from a desperate criminal. I walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, photographs of the children, Richard's favorite reading chair, the kitchen table where we'd eaten thousands of meals. Some memories I'd keep, others I'd let go. And I'd build new ones, true ones, with my family and with Nicole, and maybe someday with Catherine. Detective Morrison had called that afternoon with an update. Turner was cooperating now, hoping for a reduced sentence. He'd implicated 17 others involved in the Meridian fraud. Families were getting answers, closure, justice. The empty grave had led to justice for more people than just me. Richard's body had never been found. The FBI suspected Turner had disposed of it, though he wasn't admitting to that crime yet. Part of me was horrified by the violation. But another part, the practical part that had grown stronger through all of this, recognized the symbolism. Richard's physical form was gone, just like the false image I'd carried of him. Only the truth remained. I'd been asked if I wanted another burial once the body was recovered. I'd said no. Let Richard stay disappeared, become part of the mysteries he'd created. I didn't need a grave to remember him, and I certainly didn't need one to forgive him. Forgiveness would come, eventually. Not because Richard deserved it, but because I deserved to be free of anger. But it would come on my timeline, not anyone else's. As sunset painted the farmhouse in golden light, I sat on the back porch with a cup of tea, watching the oak tree's shadow lengthen across the yard, the place where secrets had been buried, the place where truth had emerged. My phone buzzed with a text from Nicole. Boarding now. Wish me luck. And thank you again for everything. I texted back, you don't need luck. You need courage. And you have plenty of that. Say hello to your mother for me. She responded with a heart emoji. Simple, but genuine. I thought about the next chapter of my life, whatever that would hold. Travel, maybe. I'd always wanted to see Europe, but Richard had preferred staying close to home. Or maybe I'd take classes, learn something new, or simply enjoy the quiet, the freedom from lies, the peace of a life built on truth rather than careful omissions. Whatever came next would be mine, my choice, my decision, my life. The empty grave had opened more than earth. It had opened possibilities, freed me from a marriage that had been half illusion, revealed strengths I'd possessed all along but never needed to use. I was 64 years old. Richard had thought that made me vulnerable, manageable, someone to be protected and controlled. Turner had thought it made me weak, easy to manipulate and frighten. They'd both been wrong. Age hadn't diminished me. It had refined me, given me decades of experience in reading people, solving problems, surviving disappointments. While Richard had been carefully constructing his lies, I'd been building something more durable, resilience, wisdom, strength that didn't need validation from others. The farmhouse stood solid behind me, weathered but enduring. Like me, it had survived storms and secrets, had borne witness to joy and betrayal. And like me, it would continue standing long after the drama faded, after the news stories moved on to other scandals, after Richard's name became just another footnote in legal history. I raised my teacup in a silent toast, to survival, to truth, to the unexpected strength that emerges when everything familiar falls away. The sun set behind the oak tree, painting the sky in shades of amber and gold. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new discoveries, new opportunities. But tonight I simply sat in peaceful silence, a woman who'd faced her worst fears and emerged victorious, not through violence or revenge, but through something more powerful. The quiet, persistent wisdom of someone who'd lived long enough to know that truth, however painful, was always preferable to comfortable lies. The empty grave was filled now, the secrets exposed, the lies unraveled, and I was finally, completely free. Now tell me, what would you have done if you were in my place? Let me know in the comments. Thank you for watching, and don't forget to check out the video on your screen right now. I'm sure it will surprise you.